Hello, folks. Welcome back to Non-Toxic Environments. This is your host, Andy Pace. This week's guest, Sophia Ruan Gushee, I actually had her on my podcast earlier this year, and we had such a great conversation that we needed to bring her back. She is really one of the kindest, most thoughtful, and intelligent guests I've ever had on the show. I just can't wait to bring this episode to you. Now, as a reminder, Sophia is the author of the book A to Z of D-Toxing, the ultimate guide to reducing our toxic exposures. And that book came out 8 years ago, and it's still just as detailed and informative today as it was when it first came out. So in the show notes, you will see a link to Sophia's website where you can purchase her book and where you can actually join her Detox Academy to learn more. So, folks, please sit back and have a listen. Sophia Ruan Gushee. It's good to see you.
It's great to see you, and I enjoyed speaking to you just as much as it sounds like you enjoyed speaking to me. So I'm so happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much. And so it's and I know I didn't do the introduction justice, and there's so many things that you've done. You've written books, you've been on television shows and news programs and so forth. But just give our audience a brief introduction of how you got into this.
Sure, and I'll try and keep it brief because I know we talked about it at length in the podcast we did. But for me, I had always been a really health conscious person ever since I remember being in fourth grade. I was super interested in how what I ate could serve my body. And it wasn't until I became a mom in 2007, when I was at the age of 34, that I started to care about the toxic chemicals, heavy metals, and radiation that my family would be exposed to from what I buy, own, and do. And I studied the science, the best available science that I could find to inform the easy changes that I could make. And for those who are parents, especially those who buy a lot of products for your family and your home, you realize that once you have a child, it significantly increases your purchasing activity. And to make mindful choices became really, really hard. And I'd read a lot of science with just trying to pick out the practical advice that I could find among lots of studies. And then I would apply the science towards my real life and realize that that didn't always work so well, because finding the most non-toxic sippy cup sometimes led to leakage and other practical challenges from just using it, having young kids use it. And so I was always inspired to make this path, this mindful living path, much easier for others. It was so hard for me. I thought, this has to be happening to me for a reason. And I became convinced that it happened to me because I'm supposed to make it easier for others and spread awareness and empowerment.
Oh, that's just awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. I think quite often people have to educate themselves, as you did. You get stuck in the situation where you are making these potentially life-altering choices for your kids, and you don't know if you're making the right decision. So you end up going down the rabbit hole of research, and so you've gone into that rabbit hole and came out of it, and then started educating others. So I thank you so much for doing that. It's such a huge help for people around the world.
Well, you've been doing the same thing. Thank you for what you do. I know that your area is one of the most challenging areas. So, we're in the same boat, and
we are. And so I always look at these things as that, it's one hand washes the other. And so, I can help somebody build a home, but you have to, you take it from there, and so how do you furnish it? Where are you buying clothing for your kids, or as you said, baby bottles and so forth. I know you and I chatted just a little bit before we started, and I know I want to talk about things like skincare and health and hair care and other things like that. But one of the things that came to mind just while you were introducing yourself was, I remember a few years back when it became all the rage for manufacturers to take BPA out of plastics. All right. And I'm putting you on the spot, so I apologize. But remember what they replaced it with was BPB. And at the time, the we were sold this by saying, well, at least it's not BPA. But we have no idea what BPB is and how it's going to hurt people. We've been in this now for a few years with manufacturers not using BPA and using other chemical additives. Do we know yet if these other chemical additives are any healthier for us?
We know that there is a history of a substitute chemical being not safer than the toxic chemical it was meant to replace. So I looked more into BPS. I was finding that in my research, but there's a family of bisphenol chemicals, BPB, BPS, there are others that replaced BPA. And you raise a really important point that just because a product is now free of a notorious chemical like BPA doesn't mean that it's harmless. And it's really important to understand that there is this pattern in our history of replacing one toxic chemical with another. Oftentimes, a toxic chemical has been slightly modified, given a new name, and then it's marketed, it's used in products and marketed as free of the toxic chemical people are learning they should avoid. But because it's chemically similar to the chemical it replaced, it can have similar effects and sometimes even more harmful effects. So we do know that BPS, which is one of several chemicals that replace BPA, can cause at least as much harm or at least as much risk as BPA.
And then how long will it be before that gets taken out of products? I mean, I asked that somewhat rhetorically because I know just from the research of building materials and the chemicals used in building materials that these chemicals never actually get banned for use or taken out of our products until there is class action lawsuits to prove that people are getting harmed by these. And that could take years, decades for that to happen. And so, I get a little disheartened in the building industry because, every manufacturer that I know of is screaming from the hilltops that they are eliminating all the VOCs in their products, but they're not telling you what they're using in the place of the VOCs because they don't have to tell you. It's sure, they're not using one of these 287 volatile organics, but they can be using 92 other thousand chemicals. And so I see that with home goods. And I just, how do you know, or it's probably a dumb question because you don't really know, but where can you go to trust? And I'm sure obviously reading your publications is a great first start because you're keeping on top of these things, but it's got to be tough to learn, and we don't want to learn the hard way.
Right. So you're right. Again, there are enough examples in our history where it takes decades for the science to prove that something like asbestos or lead or BPA or cigarette smoke, and I'll throw in the radiation from our technology. It takes decades for the science to prove that it's harmful. And then it takes a lot longer for the public to become aware, and class action lawsuits have very effectively created positive change more quickly than changing laws and policies. So again, there are just many examples, or too many examples of that. But A to Z of Detoxing really tries to succinctly summarize these patterns. So as a consumer, you can recognize when there's a pattern being used again. So as you said, when a manufacturer is strongly marketing non-toxic, BPA-free, PFAS-free, whatever, free of whatever, but they're not telling you what the ingredients are and they're not being transparent, that's a sign. To me, that's a red flag, and then I'm not interested in the product. And
Sure.
then I keep searching for products that do have transparency and do help me make, as a consumer, an informed choice. So the lack of transparency, I take as a red flag.
Yeah, and I try to look at it from both perspectives: the perspective of what the manufacturer is going through, and the perspective of what the client, the consumer, is going through. As a consumer, I want full transparency because, as you say, I want to know exactly what's in the products that I am purchasing and what I am, putting on myself or surrounding myself with. As a manufacturer, and as somebody who's been in the industry for a very long time, I also know how worried manufacturers can be about the competition sort of stealing their information and stealing their special secret recipe on how to make something. And so they try to give as little information as possible. It's like, years ago, whenever you invented a product, you would get it patented. And while it's still being done quite a bit today, there are a lot of manufacturers who just don't want to go through the patent process, because when doing so, you have to divulge how you did it so that nobody else repeats it. And all you're doing then is giving another manufacturer a blueprint, a basic blueprint on how to do it. All you got to do is, change an ingredient or two or a method or two, and now you've got yourself a new product. And so I see it from both ways. And this is where I look at something like health product declarations, the environmental product declarations, declare labels. Some of these things that are out there will tell you ingredients, but they won't tell you percentages. So you're not really giving somebody a recipe. You're giving somebody a list of materials or ingredients, but not exactly how to do it. So are you seeing that in some of the personal care products now?
So with personal care products, cleaning products, and food ingredients, the ingredients are listed by sort of the percent of its presence in it.
Like the
So
volume of that's in the container. Yeah.
yes. So the first few ingredients are the most meaningful.
Mhm.
But yes, there can't be full transparency. They're not sharing formulas and recipes, and really, who knows if everything is disclosed
Mhm.
in the ingredients. No one really knows, and the companies are not incentivized to be fully transparent and to really understand what's safe. They are better off not knowing if something causes harm.
Mhm.
But taking a step back, because this topic is so complicated, and I do think when it comes to building materials, that's very, very tricky, because if you're going to invest in building a new home or renovating a room, it's a fair amount of money. It's a lot of money. And so you want to make choices that are going to last a long time, so you don't have to be maintaining or repairing something every 6 to 12 months or a few years. You want to get the most lifetime from your investment. And so holistically, I feel like people should detox the things that are really easy to detox, like their cleaning products and what they put on their skin and what they eat, the easy things that they don't mind pursuing, that are budget friendly, because that will decrease their body burden. And if you can focus on decreasing your body burden in easy ways, that can take years to focus on. There's so many opportunities. And then there are other healthy home habits that help, like good ventilation, letting your home breathe, and no shoes in the house. There are other ways to help address or mitigate the risks from building materials while being mindful about what you choose. But when you just think about your overall exposures, there are so many opportunities to build up your inherent resiliency and protect your sleep quality so your body is more resilient for the exposures that are impossible to avoid or really challenging for other reasons to avoid.
One of the reasons why I really enjoyed our last conversations and this one as well is that all too often I run into people in the business who are all about, all right, you've got to go 100% this direction and completely go away from this. Otherwise, it's just not going to do enough. It's not going to help. And you are more about, let's just reduce our exposures. Like the cover of your book says, reducing our toxic exposures. It's not about perfection. It's about doing what you can when you can and making those small changes here and there. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where you're going to just realize, wow, I've changed 75% of my lifestyle. And I don't even recognize it anymore. But look at what I've done to improve my environment.
Well, other very important pillars of health are stress and joy and the quality of our connections with others. Mm-hmm. And if you live with a partner or you have children, you also have to onboard the people you live with. And if you're very strict, then that just becomes unhealthy for your stress, connections, and joy. So the balancing act is, I pursue it as an art and a science, mm-hmm. but I do place of utmost importance the quality of my connections. And so when it comes to my children and even my husband, it's important that we have conversations about what is healthy, just so that they're making informed choices. And I honor that my 15-year-old is going through a stage of rebelling and wanting nothing to do with what her mother does. But I know that if I sprinkle in some conversations that maybe when she's in college and beyond, she'll return to that value system and that perspective on life and healthy living. But for now, I want her to feel close to me and not to reject me any more than a 15-year-old will naturally reject her mom.
Well, I think children absorb so much growing up that, and most of it they're not commenting on. They're just watching, right? And listening. And years down the road, they say something or do something, and you say, well, I recognize where that came from. And so I see it in all the nieces and nephews that I have. And so I also believe, though, that we lead by example and we don't lead by telling people what they have to do or what they cannot do. And so I appreciate that approach. I think that everybody, no matter if you're trying to convince your friends, your family, what have you, or just, neighbors or people online, especially, making it bits of advice to say, well, this is what I've experienced. This is what I know. Here's my reasoning behind it. You do what you want to do, but you give them at least a bit of an education about it. And, but you don't push the issue because, in the last 30 years of working with couples, I feel like a couples therapist, and where one wants to completely gut the house and change it into all non-toxic materials, the other one could care less. I've had to kind of walk that line of, all right, what ultimately is going to help? What's not going to help? What is just making somebody feel better just from a peace of mind sort of way, or what's actually improving the health of the occupants? And so I've learned to myself even be a little relaxed on some things, and things that I used to recommend all the time to people. I now have pulled back from a little bit because I recognize that maybe that goes a little too far and they need to get to that place on their own. And they probably will at some point. And me pushing that is not going to help. It's probably just going to have them rebel back a little bit. So, I think that it's all about giving the information, being available, offering that, and then you hope at some point they make the educated decision to make a change and to adopt these healthier ways.
I agree with everything you said. I think it's so important to honor the pace at someone else's pace of evolving, their own experience. It shouldn't be, you shouldn't force anyone to change at your pace. And I was remembering when my husband and I were we did a gut renovation in our apartment, and there were a couple surface areas that my husband was super excited to have a lacquered finish. And I thought, oh, that's the most toxic approach to designing our kitchen, for example. So it'd be a lot of cabinets, and even the I forget the term for it, but what we designed for the covers of the refrigerator. But a lot of the surface area would have this lacquered gloss. But he was so excited about it. And honestly, I was kind of excited because it feels a little more glamorous. And so I talked through it with our team, and we decided we would pursue it, but we would let the products off gas, off site for as long as possible before installing it into the home. And so that's an approach where I mindfully chose a more toxic option, but I explored what can we do to reduce the off gassing in our home. And that was to let the product off gas outside the home for a period of time. And so there are other opportunities to do that. For example, if your dry cleaner is maybe using more toxic products, then letting it off gas outside your home, especially outside your bedroom, that helps. You can leave it maybe in your garage, or even better, outside. So there are ways to reduce your exposures without compromising your joy. And oftentimes at birthday parties, I always say to my kids, which I think is really powerful, I say, it's a party, just enjoy it. Mm-hmm. We're really healthy when most other times, so just enjoy the party. And I think that buys me a lot more influence at other times, because they know when something is very important to me, it's super important, because I am pretty flexible.
Well, it goes back to that. I think I've mentioned this on past shows before. That one of the rules of Vastu, design and construction, is that every corner of every room should bring you bliss. Mm. And so, if you love those lacquered cabinets, every morning you wake up and you're ready to fix your morning glass of tea, and you look at these cabinets and say, I'm so glad we made a decision to stick with this design because I love it. It feels good. And I think that we need more feel good in our lives. It's that rush of endorphin, that happiness, however you want to call it, that make you realize that you made the right decision. Now, contrary to that would be, well, you didn't do it, right? And you went with a cabinet that was completely non-toxic, but it was really boring, and you're never going to like it aesthetically. You're not getting that every morning. You're not getting that benefit of, but at least my cabinets are non-toxic. And so we've got to look at those little things. Now, everything in moderation, of course. I think that we need to make these choices here and there where they make the biggest impact for us, mentally and physically. One of the things I thought of when you're talking about doing a kitchen remodel is the unending discussion now about electric versus gas. And I have this with every person I talk to now. all across the country. And matter of fact, yesterday I was on a call, a Zoom call with Sheila Alston and her group of wellness real estate agents across the country. And the topic came up, electric versus gas. And so, some people just don't like using electric for a variety of reasons, whether it's because they don't like the control, they don't like the look of it, they don't like the electromagnetic fields. Some people don't like gas because they don't know how to control it. They don't like the smell and so forth. But I think, ultimately what's best for us is to allow us to make that decision on our own.
I agree. And by becoming informed about the risks and benefits of gas versus electric, if you choose one that is exposing you to more toxic fumes, then maybe take that as motivation to get more exercise outdoors and fresh air and eat more veggies and herbs or other nutrients that can help your body mitigate the risks posed from what you're inhaling. So you can counter the risks in other ways.
For sure. And just using the right range hoods and ventilating properly takes care of most of that. But we seem to, forget that for some reason in all these discussions when people are trying to force one thing or another. But again, it's all about making choices, and moderation, is the key to just about everything. But I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that, I think that there are many ways to look at these things inside of our homes. And again, it's not about achieving perfection, because that is never going to be possible. We make choices, and then we may choose somewhere else down the road to do something at a really high degree to make up for what we've done over here. So to your point, I agree 100%. So let me ask you about something you brought up just in quick passing about the elimination of the PFAS chemicals. This to me is like the next BPA. All of a sudden, you have manufacturers coming out saying, "All right, we're eliminating these things from our lineup." But what's going in their place?
Exactly. So if you think about the purpose of some of these PFAS or forever chemicals, as they're also called, they often create resistance to stains, stickiness, water, maybe bacteria, just resistance to a variety of things. And when you understand the purpose in a product, whether it's to protect fabric, let's say, from getting stained from water or colors, and then you see fabric like sheets or clothes that say they're free of, I'm just thinking because PFAS actually represents a family of, I think, 4,700 chemicals.
Wow.
So there are thousands of different chemical names that basically have similar traits. And if I see that a product is being marketed as free of PFOA, PFOS, or some other specific PFAS chemical, I think, well, what about the other forever chemicals that could be included instead? And I take it as a signal that this company either isn't as informed as I would want, or is misleading consumers into thinking this is a safe product free of the forever chemicals. And I don't have enough information to know if it is. And so just using common sense, if you recognize, okay, chemicals are needed to make fabrics resistant from stains. Chemicals are needed to make pots and pans not stick. Chemicals are needed to keep the butter from sticking too much to the paper that the paper wraps it in, or to not leak all the oil outside. if I see a product is being marketed as free of the PFAS chemicals, how is the product performing the way it has been? It's probably chemicals, and we just don't know if they're safe or not. So
Boy, yeah, I mean, you again, another great point, because I think the biggest thing is that we have to change our perspective. We have to change our way of thinking, and we have to change our expectations. If you want a pan that is nonstick, and up to this point, that's the only way to make a pan nonstick. And now you're going to show a pan, you're going to sell a pan that we don't use PFAS chemicals, but it looks the same, it acts the same, performs the same. What else are they using, right? So maybe we just need to recognize that, back before we had nonstick pans, I think we're all okay. And we all were just fine. It didn't, did it really improve our lives that much to have pans that didn't stick? Did it really improve our lives to have every article of clothing we wear to be wrinkle free?
Well, Andrew, in a number of metrics, one could argue that we were better off before. But in case someone watching or listening is feeling overwhelmed by what they're hearing, I just want to point out that after 15 years of research and applying the science to my real life, I always come back to very simple solutions, and they include integrating more things that humans lived with before the Industrial Revolution. And I'm not saying we have to go back to living that way, but we can balance our modern lifestyles with some old-fashioned approaches. And so when it comes to pots and pans, and I share all my household staples in my Detox Academy, but cast iron has been used for probably centuries, definitely decades, and it is nonstick. It does require a different way of using it and cleaning it. Excuse me. But once you know how to use cast iron, you realize it's so multi-purpose. I can not only use it like a pan, like a nonstick pan, but I can stick it in the oven, and I can use it as a serving platter, and it looks quite beautiful and artsy in many restaurants. And it has been around for a very long time. We are well aware of any health risks that it poses, like it can leach iron into your food, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I prefer materials that have been around for a long time, materials we understand, and materials that have relatively little controversy. So it's cast iron, glass, stainless steel.
100%. I totally agree with that. And, and think of the fact that especially over the last decade, and now in the last few years, because of the pandemic, more and more people are gravitating to the outdoors, because, of spending, before COVID, we were spending 80 to 90% of our lives indoors. During COVID, that was more like 95%. People have been just rushing to get outside, go camping, go hiking, live more of an outdoorsy lifestyle. And all that is because we're trying to harken back to a lifestyle that our ancestors have had for 1,000,000 years. And we have now really no idea of what that's like, because our lives have gotten, quote, better through chemistry, and everything's easy. It's quicker to cook, it's quicker to clean, it's quicker to do this and that, to allow us more time to work, I guess. And so I think what COVID has done is given people the license to say, you know what, I'm going to get outside, I'm going to spend more time in nature. And thinking of that, you think of, then maybe I'm going to take a page out of the Italian's book and do the slow food I'm going to, maybe dinner's not going to be 15 minutes in front of the TV. It's going to be a couple of hours preparing and sitting down with my family and enjoying it. I think we're getting to the point now where people are maybe starting to push back a little bit about how this quick and easy lifestyle is not so good for us.
Adding to that, the research shows we have a loneliness epidemic, and this was occurring before COVID. Of course, COVID exacerbated it, but this convenience, this unprecedented convenience that we have through the products that make our lives much more efficient and productive, and the technology that connects us like never before, is not leading us to be happier and more fulfilled. If we're more lonely and we're more unhealthy, we are becoming more infertile. So I just think it's important to take consideration of that data and rethink, what do you want to get out of the rest of your life? And so much of what we teach at the Detox Academy is this lifestyle that considers human health and development, the environment, but also connecting with others and living in a way that is more fulfilling and sets you up more for a more meaningful life.
Folks, I'll be linking the Detox Academy in the notes, in the show notes. Please go and sign up for this. I think it's very important for all of us to learn and then to share it with others, share the knowledge and let's at least find some of that happiness in our own lives. And we can start by making our home life healthier, safer, making our bodies, surrounding them with healthier materials, eating healthier foods. I mean, all this goes together. There's not one of these things that we can do on its own that'll make a big difference ultimately, but we do a little bit of all of it. We're going to get there faster. And so I know I gave you some ideas of some of the things I was going to talk about today, and I probably didn't talk about any of them, so I apologize. But before we go, I guess I'm going to ask anybody who's listening if they have any questions. Also, Sophia, is there anything that you wanted to tell us about, maybe things you're working on, some new topics, something we didn't discuss yet?
I'm working on a lot of things because I'm
Excellent.
super passionate and excited about all the ways I can maybe change the world for the better. But the Detox Academy has been taking up a lot of my time more recently, just because there are just so many things to optimize. So I'll just explain that at the Detox Academy, there are 7 pillars. And they're kind of gateways into this practical, non-toxic lifestyle. They represent some of the most common sources of our toxic exposures. So it represents cleaning products, self-care products, which includes not just beauty products, but personal care products, cleaning, EMFs, diet, interior design, and I might be leaving out, and mindset. And I think I want to present it this way so someone could arrive and just pick what is resonating right now, what feels really easy to tackle right now. And the information is presented in a kind of a menu of options of a easy tip you can pursue, but presented in a multidimensional way, meaning there are checklists, there are videos, there are weekly live forums so we can talk about how do you actually change your life. So I mentioned cast iron pots and pans earlier. Once I bought cast iron, I didn't know how to use it, how to clean it, and then what recipes also are mindful. And there's so many ingredients that deserve mindfulness. For example, recently I was updating one of our all of these pillars have shopping guides, because I research so many products I buy. So for example, I did a deeper dive than I expected into spices. There have been studies on heavy metals in spices, and certain brands tested lower for heavy metals or had no heavy metals than others. And these are things I want to know. If I'm going to spend $5, $7 on a jar of organic spices, I rather pick the one with fewer lead, cadmium, or mercury or arsenic. Same with rice. There have been studies on which types of rice have less arsenic. There's certain brands that tend to test for lower levels. So these are details I wanted to know, and I make that easier for members of the Detox Academy. And so there's the Detox Academy, which is meant to help change your life gradually, one product at a time. And then I've been working a lot on the 40-day home detox, which is a more transformative experience for someone who is more motivated to change their life because maybe they want to detox for pregnancy or fertility treatments, or they have a compromised immune system. And it is designed to change how you see the world so you can detox from more informed common sense, and you'll learn how to make safer choices by just like we talked earlier about using your common sense about fabrics. Is it natural for fabric to not absorb water? It is for wool, but not other things. And so just becoming more informed of what is not natural, and therefore there are probably chemicals involved, can make it easier to make safer choices, because just in the United States, there have been over 84,000 chemicals introduced into the world. And every year there's 1,000 to 3,000 new chemicals introduced. Avoiding chemicals, specific names, is not a sustainable approach.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Started.
Yeah. Right. I mean, we don't know what we're exposing ourselves to. So all we can do is, when we do know we're being exposed to something, is to try to reduce that exposure, which is, exactly what you promote. It must be a full-time job just keeping your information up to date with all the things you talk about in the academy, in your books. I mean, it's just, I commend you for the amount of time that you take to research and update. And folks, just so you know, if you go into the chat area of the site here, you'll see that I linked the Detox Academy. So it's ruanliving.com/detox-academy. You can copy and paste it or click on it now. It'll open up in a new window. Otherwise, for those listening to the podcast later on, it'll be in the notes, and you can get it out of there. Sophia, thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate it, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
It's my pleasure.
All right. And so, folks, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to just add it to the Circle community chat. Sophia's a member here, and if there's anything that she can help with, I'm sure she'll be available for you. Otherwise, go to her site and join her Detox Academy, because there's so much more to learn than what we just talked about in the last 45 minutes. So with that, we will talk again next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.